All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Looks good.
Looking up. Okay, perfect. So schema markup and the knowledge graph. We'll be talking about these two things today. So what are we going to talk about? Just kind of an overview. What is schema markup? What is the knowledge graph? Types of schema markup, so we'll jump around a bit there. How we use schema as an SEO team. Structured data best practices. And schema and structured data is interchangeable. They are the same thing, if you didn't know. So just to add that context there. Structured data case studies and results. So some examples of some really cool stuff that's been done with structured data across the industry. And then theorize on the potential future of schema markup and really more the future of the knowledge graph and the semantic web. Awesome. So what is schema markup? Where it began. So the semantic web was popularized by Tim Berners-Lee. He's the inventor of the World Wide Web. In 1994, he originally thought about the semantic web. It wasn't widely, or didn't start to become widely accepted until 1999 and 2001, when he had further research into the semantic web, or just further, he had a little bit more robust theory, I guess. But this is just kind of a quote from Tim Berners-Lee. He had a dream for the web in which computers become capable of analyzing all the data on the web, the contents, links, and transactions between people and computers. Semantic web, which makes this possible. Really cool kind of vision for the web. And we haven't quite achieved what his original thought was here, or his original vision. But with machine learning algorithms, schema markup, the knowledge graph, you can kind of see a resemblance of Tim Berners-Lee original vision of the semantic web. Sorry, I have a Slack. I don't know. I want to make sure I'm not cutting out or something. I'm checking. Okay. I can't see it right now. So if somebody Slack me, maybe message me in here if I'm cutting out or you can't hear me too good. But yeah, really cool stuff. This is kind of where the vision for the semantic web and schema markup started. So what is schema markup? Just kind of overview of some of the benefits. Structured data or schema markup is a great way to help your website stand out from competitors. Some benefits include helping search engines better understand the content on your web page, improving your brand presence through enhancing the brand's knowledge graph, and increasing CTR or click-through rate through rich results, and more. Really the overall kind of thought here is just creating a better understanding of your brand, what you do, and helping search engines understand that better. So that's just kind of some of the benefits. Getting into the nitty-gritty of what is structured data, and you can see an example of it on the left here. But schema markup is a structured data vocabulary that helps search engines better understand the content and entities on your website. It was originally a collaboration between Google, Bing, Yahoo, and Yandex, so the big search engines came together to create a language that they could all understand and parse through to create understanding of entities that are in content and how those entities relate to each other. Schema markup is code, which is a data vocabulary, and it can appear in multiple forms, including JSON, LD, and HTML. On the left, you're seeing an example of JSON schema, which is kind of the de facto standard nowadays. But schema continues to grow in popularity and become more important to search engines in creating semantic understandings. Here's some just statistics around structured data usage, but really the most important data that's not represented here, and this is my own analysis, is 90% of websites aren't using structured data correctly to really create the entity understanding and semantic understanding that they should be. We talked about rich results before and some of the benefits that structured data brings. Here is that in real life, or here's how it shows up in SERP results. In the top left, you can see an example of a featured snippet rich result. This is one of our clients, Weightwise, but you can see how valuable owning that digital real estate at the top of SERPs is. Position 0, position 1. It is, provides a lot of information. It can build brand affinity. It can improve your CTR. So yeah, they're huge benefit as far as rich results go. On the bottom left here, you can see an example of a product rich result benefit. So this would show your review rating schema. It would show your pricing. Just another great way to help your results stand out in the SERPs from others. The top right, you see an example of job posting schema. So in order to show up in this box, your website has to have job posting schema on it, and it makes you eligible to show up in the jobs area of Google search results. So really cool. I mean, if you have, if you're in the construction industry and you're looking for, 5 new employees, this can obviously be valuable to show up in that area when people are searching for those openings. In the bottom right here, you can see an example of event schema markup. Another great rich result here, and something really cool about event schema is that they can actually trigger their own knowledge graph from just having structured data highlighted on an event. So these are just a few examples of the cool rich results and benefits you can see from having structured data on your website and implementing structured data correctly. So a little bit of hype around structured data, or just discussion around structured data. On the left here, we have John Mueller, who is the head webmaster trends analyst at Google. He asked, what are you most excited for in the web world or web community in 2021? And Alita Solis, who is the queen of international SEO, replied. And she has a really cool SEO newsletter, probably my favorite SEO newsletter, SEO FOMO. So if you have any interest, I highly recommend signing up because she's really shares some really cool stuff. But she replied, she's excited for the evolution of visual search, the role of structured data within SERP features, predictive search features, the evolution of discover results. And John replied to her, it feels like structured data will lay the foundation for the other two. So time to get comfy with those JSON brackets. So you can see how valuable structured data is for search engines, right now and going forward. They're continually relying on it to better understand what entities are on your website, how those entities relate to the other entities, to help rank you for the correct keywords. So structured data is really super important to SEO. I think we already knew that, but yeah. Another cool quote by John here. There's no generic ranking boost for structured data usage. However, structured data can make it easier to understand what the web page is about, which can make it easier to show where it's relevant. So it improves your ranking for the right terms. Obviously, we want to be showing up for the right keywords. We want to be showing up when our target audience is searching for those keywords. So structured data is a tool to enable you to do that, and it's very, very important. Something else John mentioned that I didn't include here in the graph, but he said Google, another favorite quote of mine is, Google uses structured data for more than just rich results. So when you're creating your schema markup strategy, you shouldn't be just focusing on schema that provides rich results. You should be focusing on other types, service schema and other types of schema that aren't eligible for rich results, because they're still using that to better understand the entities represented on your website. So schema markup can be intimidating or boring, whatever you want to say, but it shouldn't be. I'm here to help with that, I think, or cause additional confusion. We'll see. Here's just some highlights. All schema markup is dictionary and lists. You see all this code on the left, which seems really intimidating, but it's not. It's just dictionaries and lists. Similar to a normal dictionary that uses a word and a definition, schema markup uses a computer science dictionary that uses key value pairs to mark to mark up data types. So the key would be your word, and the value would be your definition, similar to how a regular dictionary works here. There's tons of documentation out there. We'll dig into dictionaries a little more in a future slide here, just a bit more. There's tons of documentation that exists on structured data, schema.org, Google, and so much more. Really, there's endless amounts of resources out there. There's a ton of tools that can help with developing structured data, from Merkle's SEO tool to Rank Ranger, Steal My Schema. There's a bunch out there. Ask the Experts, John Mueller, upon hundreds of others in the SEO community, can be very helpful if you have questions about schema markup, or they have a ton of resources available. And really, it's only a search away, so you can quickly find what you're looking for from just a Google search. Imagine that. It's pretty well documented at this point. They're still testing, and more to come, but it's pretty well documented to this point. Just kind of going back to that dictionary principle, I want to just touch on that a bit more. But schema properties, what we're seeing highlighted in red, that would be an example of a schema property type called name, are represented using key value pairs. We can see the key here being name and the value being file integrity mono. Structured data vocabulary uses dictionaries and lists to represent eligible properties from schema.org vocabulary. It is easiest finding eligible properties of the specific type of structured data you are creating on schema.org and adding the key value pair in your schema markup. I'll share schema.org next, but you'd identify your property and then you just add it to your code. Really, it's pretty straightforward as far as when you're actually marking this stuff up and you're actually out there creating your structure. Here is schema.org. There's really so many resources here. It's one of my favorite resources for structured data. It covers in detail the hundreds of types of schema markup available, as well as the thousands upon thousands of schema properties that you can find there. And most examples of schema, they share an example of the actual schema block down at the bottom for JSON LD or microdata, so you can actually see examples of the schema markup there, which is really cool. Getting into the knowledge graph, and we'll hop back to structured data, but we'll start to see how these two entities are kind of connected. So here we can kind of see an example of my basic knowledge graph, and you can start to see how the people, places, and things are connected in the knowledge graph. But looking at one of these properties here, you can see I'm a member of Webfor, as are all of you. And Kevin Getch is the founder of Webfor. So you can start to see how these properties are connected in the knowledge graph and how quickly the knowledge graph grows to billions of entities and how these entities are all connected. So what is the knowledge graph? The knowledge graph is a knowledge base used to enhance search engine results. Search engines use information in the knowledge graph to understand how facts, people, and places are connected to each other to deliver more focused and relevant search results. The facts, people, and places are referred to as entities and represent a node in the knowledge graph. Search engines think in terms of things, not strings. So previously in old algorithms, and most of you are already well aware of this, but search engines analyze the content that was on a page to create an understanding of that page and what it represented and what keywords it should rank for. Now search engines analyze the content on a page to understand the entities that are represented in that page and how those entities are related to each other to create a semantic understanding of what keywords you should be ranking for, rather than looking at the strings that are on a web page. So this isn't anything new. This has been around for quite a while, but the knowledge graph is kind of what powers that. And here's another example of a basic knowledge graph. We can see the Queen's knowledge graph up top. Queen Elizabeth's spouse is Prince Philip. And you can start to see how these connections are made on her knowledge graph. And then more importantly, down below, you can see how these connections are represented in rich results. Her children are represented in her knowledge graph here. Images of these other connections in the knowledge graph are represented here. The successors are listed here. So you can see how this information that is in Queen Elizabeth's knowledge graph feeds the results in her SERPs. So obviously those two are closely related. But Google, these connections here are actually what's called a semantic triple. So Google, of course, has a pattern for these connections in the knowledge graph for semantic triples, and I do share that on the next slide, as well as some examples. So let's talk about that a little more, the semantic triple principle. So this is the Google's patent down below, system for extracting semantic triples for building a knowledge base. But a triple or a semantic triple, knowledge graphs use semantic triples to connect entities in the knowledge graph and to understand those entities in the knowledge graph. A triple is composed of a subject, the predicate, and its object. Triples are used to describe the facts in the real world. So an example of a very basic triple here is Bob is a plumber, with Bob being the subject, is being the predicate, and plumber being the object. You can see how these two entities are connected using the semantic principle, or the semantic triple principle. Yeah, I just want to make sure I do. Yeah, cool. And going on to some examples of semantic triples here. So referring back to that knowledge graph example of Queen Elizabeth's spouse is Prince Philip. So Queen Elizabeth is the subject, spouse is the predicate, Prince Philip is the object. You can see how the semantic relationship, or how this relationship is connected using a semantic triple here. And then a little more relevant example for us, Tripwire Inc.'s area served is worldwide. Tripwire Inc. is the subject, area served is the predicate, and world is the object. So you're starting to see how these entities are connected in the knowledge graph using the semantic triple principle. It's kind of how the core behind how it works here. So how do you identify entities in the knowledge graph? Well, there's a ton of resources out there, but Google Search Central has their knowledge graph search API here. And you can search for anything from a bench to an organization like Tripwire. So querying Tripwire here, we can see the entity that's returned for them as \n\0c23hq. And that is Tripwire's knowledge graph ID, or MRE-ID. That MRE-ID is specifically assigned to Tripwire and is a reference to their brand's entity in the knowledge graph. No other entity in the knowledge graph can have that MRE-ID. That is specific to Tripwire, and that is one way that you can reference Tripwire's brand in the knowledge graph and create semantic understanding. So when we query that result, we pop in their knowledge graph ID into a search result. We can see what's returned here. We can see Tripwire's knowledge graph ID, or knowledge graph, sorry, not knowledge graph ID. We can see the most relevant results for Tripwire here. So you can see how Google is using these knowledge graph IDs or MERE-IDs to power the knowledge graph and create the connections. And just kind of the first part of how you can connect, or how connected knowledge graph and structured data are together. So the knowledge graph search API, this is directly on their website. The knowledge graph search API lets you find entities in the knowledge graph, in the knowledge graph. The API uses standard schema.org types and is compliant with the JSON LD specification. So you can see how closely these two knowledge graph and structured data are connected. Google is basically using, schema.org properties to fuel and understand their knowledge graph, to create understanding in their knowledge graph. So how can you use the structured data to feed the knowledge graph? Well, creating entity and semantic relationships. You can connect to the knowledge graph. Structured data makes it possible to provide search engines with the information they are looking for to better understand your website and web page. You can use structured data to create semantic relationships to other entities in the knowledge graph And this should be one of the first steps of any SEO strategy. We'll talk a bit more in detail about this, although I don't have hours to dive into it too much. But we'll talk about some techniques and strategies with structured data for connecting to the knowledge graph and different entities in the knowledge graph a little bit further into the presentation here. Bringing it back to structured data. So types of structured data, how many are there? Well, I did mention this earlier, but there are hundreds of types of structured data markup and thousands upon thousands of structured data markup properties. Creating a schema markup strategy for the website will help guide your decision-making and what schema you develop. Map out your schema. It is helpful to understand what type of schema should be on what pages and really creating an overall strategy. With this in mind, let's look at some of the most important types of schema markup for our local clients. Local business. So local business schema is really one of the first schemas we should be implementing on all local clients. And this schema markup includes 40 plus subtypes for different types of businesses, and it highlights everything from address to their longitude and latitude and much more. So very helpful schema. Organization schema is very important for feeding the knowledge graph and understanding of the knowledge graph for your brand. But organization schema is used to represent an organization such as school, corporation, or club. It should be added to your home page specifically. FAQ schema used on a web page presenting one or more FAQs. So you could add this to a blog or service or product page to provide additional rich results for frequently asked questions. Author schema highlights the author of the content. It reinforces your experience, your expertise, authoritativeness, and trust, and builds trust with search engines. Especially in the YMYL categories, having that expert author can be very helpful in delivering really good search results, improving search results. In product and service schema, really all of our products and service pages should have one of these schemas or both of these schemas added to them because it's beneficial in just creating that semantic understanding. And there are tons of others, but I just picked and chose a few based on some of my favorites. And where can you find the others? Well, we already talked about it a bit, but schema.org, you can go here and it has every type of schema you can imagine, types that are eligible for rich results, types that aren't eligible for rich results, but it is the go-to resource. And it can be a bit tough reading at first, but once you have a strong understanding of schema or a somewhat of an understanding of schema, it quickly starts to make sense. Another great resource here is Google Search Central. This resource specifically highlights schema markup that is eligible for rich results. So the only schema that they will share here is rich result schema, but they're also very good about telling you when they're beta testing schema. So if you want to be up to date on all things Google and schema, this is really a great resource. So how do we use schema as an SEO team? The actual application. Well, as an SEO team, we find opportunities across our client's website to mark up information that will help search engines better understand what they do, what they want to be found for, and how their entities should be represented on the knowledge graph. Developing a schema markup strategy will help guide what type of schema is most relevant for each client. Some schema markup best practices. Only mark up what is on page. Do not mark up information or content that is not represented on that page because that could potentially cause issues with not manual actions, but potential penalties with schema markup. So you don't want to be representing entities or things that aren't represented on that page with your schema markup. Don't put the same schema on every page. So each page has its own purpose. So each page should have its own specific type of schema markup. Use the most specific type of schema possible. More specific, the better. So with local business schema, for example, if we have a general contractor, we should be using the general contractor subtype of schema rather than the local business schema. It's much more specific. It's going to much better understand what they do, who they are, or much better represent what they are, what they do, and who they are. Connect your schema markup. Martha Van Berkel's a huge proponent on this. Well, I think most schema people are, but you can use your @IDs. We'll talk about this a bit more. Nested schema and other strong connectors to connect schema markup blocks, internal and external on the website, and to connect to other entities in the knowledge graph. Tell a story with your schema markup. So let your schema markup tell the story of your brand, build relevance and authority with your schema markup. And the most important thing here, validate your schema. Make sure your schema is error-free. If it has errors, Google's not going to read your schema. It'll make you ineligible for its results. But if you forget something like something as simple as a comma or a closing bracket, that could actually crash your site because you're adding these code blocks to the head of the web page. So just validate it. Make sure that there's no issues with the schema before you're adding it to your site. Some structured data rich results. So here's some really cool things that have been done with schema markup. Alan Bleiweiss, who's a pretty well-known SEO, he had a client experimenting with his recommendation to add schema to older content on a list page from 2015. They added item list schema to the page, and he saw a 91% increase in page views and 111% increase in unique page views from adding that item list schema, which is really cool. Rakuten, which is a multinational corporation, they're like a coupon site. They saw some astronomical numbers from implementing schema markup, about 2.7 times more traffic from search engines from implementing schema markup on their website, and 1.5 times increase in session duration. So that is obviously some really, really, really cool numbers there. We had an e-commerce store added product markup with aggregate offer and price, and they saw 13,000 new impressions in search results per day from adding the product schema. And a nonprofit added FAQ page schema to the FAQ page, additional 3,600 clicks and 129,000 impressions in 6 months. So there's thousands of other examples, but this just shows you kind of the power of having some detailed schema markup can be, how powerful detailed schema markup can be for your website. And if you guys aren't bored enough, let's talk about some advanced structured data applications. I like the laughs. I got 2 chuckles. Okay. Okay. So one, use the @IDs. I've referenced this before. 1 second. Sorry. But you can use your @ID URIs to connect nodes of schema. There's an example of a URI right there. It looks very similar to a URL, but it's something that you would add to your schema block. And then you can reference this from other blocks of schema to tie those schema blocks together. So for example, and that's internally and externally. So for example, if you had a service or a product that you're marking up and you want to mark up this organization was the one, the brand providing the schema, you could reference your URI of your organization schema instead of recreating your schema block 12 times across your website. So it minimizes the schema code, it connects the schema blocks, but you can also reference schema blocks on external websites. So if you did a collaboration with another company and you want to reference their organization, you can actually reference their URI to create that semantic understanding in the knowledge graph. Wikidata and Firebase. So you can use Wikidata's knowledge base, it was previously Firebase, to identify and connect entities in the knowledge graph with your schema markup. You can nest multiple types of schema. So nesting schema can improve the semantic understanding of your page and make you eligible for more rich results. So we talked about a bit, you can nest organization schema into service product schema and much, much more to further define the entity and what your web page is about and what your brand is about. And some more precision identifiers here, Wikipedia and product ontology. They can also be used to identify semantic relationships throughout the knowledge graph. So these are some cool resources. And we can talk about this more if anybody wants to take this offline. I know I'm touching on this stuff very quickly, but happy to answer any questions after or whenever if somebody has some questions. And here's some of my favorite types of schema for creating those precision identifiers or those connections in the knowledge graph. The same as schema, knows about schema, additional type schema, the item list. These are all super relevant. Cool. And let's go over some resources really quickly. I've shared a few of them quite a bit at schema.org, all things schema if you want to check it out. Google Search Central. My favorite testing tool, the Google Structured Data Testing tool. This tool is sunsetting, and from what I've heard, it will be moved to schema.org instead of Google. So eventually, this will be moved over to schema.org so you can test for all types of schema and not just rich result schema. And then Google's new results test tool, their new rich results test tool. So this is the one they're migrating their structured data testing to. And it's also cool because it tells you if your schema is eligible for rich results and what types of schema are on your page that are eligible for rich results. So it provides a different purpose than the structured data testing tool. And here's some tools out there for creating schema. If you don't want to hand code it, which I personally think is the best way to do it, although Schema app is a pretty close second. But Merkle is probably one of the best structured data tools out there for developing and authoring schema. Rank Ranger, another great tool, multiple types of schema eligible for creation in there. Steal our Schema Markup. This is a website. They have probably 40 or 50 different types of schema with Schema Markup examples that you can check out. Really cool stuff. Google Structured Data Markup Helper used to be used more frequently in the industry, but it's still out there and available if you want to check it out. Schema app has a Schema Pass tool, and this actually will let you know when you can connect different properties to different types of schema and how they connect, so you can start nesting multiple types of schema together, or creating kind of advanced level schema connections there. But that's a really great resource, Schema Pass from Schema app. And just to theorize on the future schema sec, I am not qualified to discuss this, but with advancements in machine learning algorithms from Smith to BERT to Passages launching the other day, we can see Tim Berners-Lee original's vision of the semantic web eventually one day really becoming a reality in his original vision. I didn't know that before, so that's a quote from Aubrey because I made her listen to this presentation twice, and she gave me a hard time, so that was her quote that I took away from that. And there will be no questions. Are there any questions?
That was awesome. The only thing I'd say is you're definitely qualified.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It was fun. This was fun. Learning experience. I still feel it's a bit all over the place, but my goal creating this presentation was that I could take someone who had absolutely no idea what Schema Markup was and help them kind of learn the foundation, or just how it works, how it works behind the scenes. Thank you, Kelly. Yeah, I am open for questions despite this confusing Michael Scott gif here. But I know, So if anybody has any questions, let me know. I'm here.
I just want to say ditto to what Kevin said. So everyone knows, when Michael and I were talking about what he was going to present for Lunch and Learn, he's like, I don't know if I should do schema. And I was like, you're the only person who should do schema. I was like, I have a schema question. I asked you about it. So yeah, Michael, more than qualified. I think this is something that I would love the content team to watch the recording. I know that there's a lot of great stuff in here for them, obviously, and the SEO team and everyone else. But yeah, I really, really appreciate you doing this. There's tons of great information in here.
Yeah, of course.
So I have a follow-up question. When we take this whole video and turn it into a in-depth blog on schema markup and knowledge graph, what different schema are you going to utilize to mark up the video and the whole thing?
Well, video will get video schema, and then the article will get article schema. I stole it, but I have really this guy, Clint Butler. He's a fairly well-known SEO. He is like super knowledgeable about schema. He has like $1,000 schema markup course. I stole his article schema. So I borrowed it, I guess we could say. But it is really robust. It's super robust, and it, yeah, we could check it out together another time. But it's like the most robust article schema I've ever seen in my life. It gets me all fired up.
Are you then still using like for author? So I'm the author of the article.
Yeah.
On that side too.
Yeah, it ties in author schema. If we have an author page set up, then it would reference back the author page. Yeah, and the author of the content. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot in there. It has even stuff I didn't know about, because it's really cool article schema. We can share some examples of it in the future. I'm trying to remember exactly all the different types that are in there, but it's a lot. It's really cool. I got off track there a bit, but the triples principle also applies to content. I'm getting off track here a bit, but that whole triples, how you create connections in the knowledge graph. So content works in much the same way, even though Google is much, further understanding with algorithms. They still, at a core principle, they understand through that semantic triples. So referencing, Tripwire is or offers file integrity monitoring services. A triple, a word or a sentence like that creates that semantic understanding because it's using that same triples principle as the knowledge graph. Hopefully I'm not too confusing there when I'm saying that. But yeah, content works in much the same way schema markup works in creating those connections.
I had a question, Michael. So this got me thinking about how we as account managers can start to gather information that helps feed the details that the SEO team needs for the markup, and thinking about maybe putting together something that allows us to, have like a local business data gathering worksheet that gets filled out as we're onboarding and getting details from the client. Would that be something that's helpful for the SEO team, or how do you go about getting that stuff without that information in front of you? Do you just go search it?
Well, a lot of the time that you're only marking up what is on the page for the most part, right? So most of the information that you're going to collect is represented on that page. They're not the description of that content, the entities that are represented in that content, the address, all of that stuff should typically be on the page. But there's probably something to that, and more how Kevin was talking about, more on the author side of things, to better understand, who the CEO of that company is, and start building up the authority of that CEO as the author, as the knowledge, as the go-to resource in that industry. I'm trying to think of a word here, but I haven't, not the knowledge. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's unimportant. But yeah, that's the type of content. We could probably talk offline about that, more about collecting, that type of author content to how we can better build up their authority the CEOs or the corporation or the board of directors, whatever.
So it sounds like it would be more about identifying opportunities where content could be created to support more schema markup as a strategy then.
Yeah, that probably would be the best way to say it.
So like tying, there's a lot of times where we're tying into building up a brand as a thought leader in the industry, but getting individuals that work for that brand to develop them and develop their thought profile under the EAT principle, and obviously that will build up the company as well. So
yeah, Kevin said it much better than I can. So,
and Trisha, to also add on to both of those answers, it's like FAQ pages. You can add schema to FAQ pages. You can add how-to schema, right, to different blog posts. You can add articles. So it's a good way to help build up content strategies for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I had one question.
Absolutely.
One more question. Are vectors and triples the same thing? Because when you said triples, I was thinking I remember that as vectors, and I'm thinking, is that something different, or and that's just maybe the same term for the same thing?
Ooh. You've stumped me, Kevin. Vector. I know I've heard of it, but I think I've heard of it more. Let me see. A vector is a one-dimensional data structure. So a vector, it's a data type.
I believe it's pretty similar. If that's just what I remember when you said triples, and I was thinking
it's a data structure. So it's a data type. It looks like. I don't think it's the same principle, but it is a data type. So it's how you mark up it'd be more like marking up a property, I think.
So
vectors
are more, at least the way I'm referencing them, because there's probably multiple terms, are in natural language processing, and it's how they identify like semantics of context within the meaning of those words. So when you were saying triples, you were talking about that. It seems very similar, and so I just think maybe they're. I think maybe they're the same thing, interchangeable, or maybe they're just one's used in a data science terminology for natural language processing.
I need to look into vectors for NLP. That is very interesting. They sound identical.
I think they're pretty much the same, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, no, that they sound like it for sure. Well, I appreciate you all hopping on, and I know this isn't the most entertaining stuff, but it gets me fired up. And this is the type of stuff I like to geek out on. So I really appreciate y'all listening to it.
It was awesome. Great job, Michael.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
You can have 14 minutes back. I appreciate you all so much.